Nathan Cole had always believed he understood the world around him, that the way his eyes interpreted the environment was truth itself, but stepping into Marrow's end quickly dismantled that fragile certainty. The streets were empty yet not silent, every whisper of wind felt like a low voice brushing across his eardrums, and every shadow flickered in the corner of his vision as if it had life beyond mere darkness. Streetlights struggled to illuminate the fog that rolled across cracked asphalt, leaving him with the sense that he was walking through a half-formed memory, a place caught between reality and something else entirely. His mind kept insisting that nothing was wrong, but every instinct screamed that it was. When he caught a figure crouching in a doorway, a shadow that seemed almost human yet wrong in its proportions, it vanished the instant he blinked. It was not gone, though, it lingered in the edges of his perception, reminding him that seeing was not believing, that perhaps in this town, your brain was the first to lie. The first day at the school confirmed Nathan's growing unease. He had been warned by Mara, the psychology teacher who had taken a keen interest in him, that this building did not obey the normal rules of perception, but experiencing it firsthand was far worse. Students and teachers alike seemed subtly displaced, their movements delayed, their gazes following him a beat too late. He could swear that the hallway stretched further than it physically could, that a doorway he passed 10 minutes ago reappeared where it should not have. At times, he glimpsed people whose limbs bent at impossible angles, faces elongated or squashed in ways that shouldn't exist in any biology textbook, yet his brain forced him to rationalize them as tricks of light, exhaustion, stress, but the nagging terror never left. Every glance over his shoulder made the hallway seem alive, shifting beneath him, testing the reliability of his vision, forcing him to doubt every interpretation of what he saw that night. In his apartment, the fractures became undeniable. The furniture he had unpacked with care appeared subtly skewed, edges that should have been straight slanted ever so slightly, doors misaligned by fractions of an inch. Nathan caught movement at the periphery of his sight, a figure pacing, then disappearing when he tried to focus directly. Photos he never took filled his phone gallery, images of his own apartment, blurred but unmistakable. There were figures in those photos, hunched, moving in ways that defied the laws of physics. He tried to convince himself that sleep deprivation had twisted his perception, that his mind was tired and overworked, but the sense of being watched persisted. The air seemed heavier, vibrating with anticipation. The walls themselves appeared to pulse faintly, as if the space was breathing, expanding and contracting imperceptibly. By the time he finally tried to sleep, he understood a terrifying truth: his brain could no longer be trusted, and what he perceived was no longer guaranteed to match reality. Sleep offered no sanctuary. Darkness in his apartment was alive, not with ordinary sounds, but with whispers too soft to identify, conversations whose content hovered just out of comprehension, teasing his sanity. Shadows began behaving independently of light, curling and stretching where no light source could cast them, forming shapes that suggested movement, presence, intent. His reflection in the mirror betrayed him. It lingered with a smirk after he had stopped smiling, and his eyes seemed to shift slightly, independently, mocking him. Every sound became ambiguous, each shadow a potential predator. Mara's warning echoed in his mind: the mind fills gaps to protect itself, but here, the gaps were being exploited. Nathan's terror was not of a creature he could fight, it was the betrayal of his own senses, the untrustworthy mechanisms meant to interpret the world around him. Desperation drove him to seek Mara's insight. She had seen the anomalies firsthand and had catalogued them: flickers, distortions, shadows that behaved unnaturally. Her voice was steady but tight with apprehension as she explained: this place feeds on perception itself. It shapes what you see, forces your brain to create false conclusions, and in doing so, it traps the mind in endless uncertainty. As they spoke, the hallway seemed to pulse subtly, a barely perceptible rhythm that neither fully noticed until a door shifted behind Mara and then corrected itself the instant they looked. Nathan realized that Mara was not exaggerating. The building itself, the very town, conspired to warp perception, exploiting the weaknesses in human cognition, forcing them to rely on instinct that could no longer be trusted. The realization was dizzying. The real danger was not visible, it was in the gaps between vision and understanding, in the misreading of every single shadow. They ventured into the abandoned wing of the school together, the floorboards groaning beneath their feet, lights flickering erratically. The walls warped subtly, twisting perspectives that made hallways seem impossibly long, doorways too short, angles that bent reality itself. Shapes flickered at the edges of vision, figures half formed, limbs too long, faces too wide, as if the architecture and the shadows conspired to reshape the human eye's interpretation of the world. Mara whispered warnings, observing the distortions. It knows what you expect to see, Nathan. It fills the gaps with forms you trust and fears you do not. It is a predator in perception, and we are prey. When a figure lunged from the darkness, Nathan's brain refused to reconcile its impossible anatomy, scrambling to make sense of multiple interpretations at once. The terror was not in what could strike him, it was in the knowledge that he could never truly know what was striking. Nathan awoke alone, drenched in sweat, his apartment somehow wrong once again, furniture subtly misaligned, shadows slithering just beyond the edges of vision. Mara's voice echoed faintly, as though carried through the walls, though she was not present. He understood then that the town itself was alive in perception, and the danger he faced was endless and invisible. Reality was malleable here, and the mind could not be trusted to interpret it accurately. Every glance could hide a threat, every shadow a sentient presence, and worse, every attempt to record or rationalize was subject to the same manipulation. Nathan's understanding was terrifyingly clear. In Marrow's end, seeing was believing no longer, and the ultimate horror was that the mind itself was the battlefield, constantly misled by the very organ meant to protect it. There was no escape,